The Lightning win a thriller in overtime last night against the Boston Bruins. Can this team be turning the corner and turning into a potential deep playoff run team? We talk about all that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Dankier. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Locked On Lightning. I just want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're breaking down last night's game against the Boston Bruins, in which the Lightning battled back and forth with one of the top teams in the NHL, if not the top team in the NHL. Was able to really bring the Bruins down to their level. And I guess that's a good way to really summarize the game. And that's the way that I think that, when we look at this team, we look at this Lightning team and we talk about how the Lightning should be playing. And, this isn't anything new. If you've been following this team for a while, if you've been following my podcast for a while, that really what the thing that really works well long-term for the Lightning is, and you could tell when they're playing great hockey as they did last night, except for maybe those last two goals in which Boston tied it and then took the lead. Really what the Lightning do well and when they're rolling on all cylinders is that they don't try to necessarily match the other team. I mean, they do. They did last night. They did in the previous win against Edmonton. But what they really do well that we have seen as really the winning formula for this team over the last couple of years when they do play well is that they force teams to play down to their level. And that's not so much as to say that the Lightning are in these wins a lesser team than an Edmonton Oilers or a Boston Bruins, even though, yes, we could say going into last night's game that, yes, confidently in the grand scheme of things, when you look at these two teams and you look at where they are at this point in time in the NHL season, yes, the Boston Bruins are a better team. Yes, at certain points during last night's game, the Boston Bruins were a better team. You did see that talent gap to a certain degree between these two teams. But what the Lightning did very well last night that very much impressed me and is that they were able to force Boston to adjust to how they were playing. It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't a scenario that we've seen maybe in games past where the Lightning have been playing their game and have had to adjust to what the opposing team was doing. It was more so the opposite. And it wasn't so much that the Lightning were doing things to obstruct Boston and forcing them to do this, that, and the other thing. It was more so that the way that they were playing was really the defining factor. It was really the thing that, the Lightning were just worried about going out there, doing what they had to do. And their game plan was obstructing everything indirectly from what Boston was doing. It wasn't like they were focusing and reacting to what the other team was doing. And when Tampa plays like that, it really instills a lot of confidence. And you saw it in the Edmonton game too as well. And we didn't get a chance to talk about that yesterday, but really want to talk about it as, that was a big win just because, Connor McDavid did not score in that game, which is a huge plus. And, as well as the Lightning kind of struggle against top tier players. And even in this Boston game, yes, David Pastrnak did score a goal in this, a late one that ended up tying the game, which, followed a bad sequence, but the way the Lightning were playing, it really forces and you take what the Lightning did against Edmonton and then against Boston last night. It really forces opposing teams to get a little bit more creative, to really push the limit of their game plans. It really forces them to play four lines. It really forces them to get everybody involved. And that doesn't necessarily happen a lot for a lot of teams. It's the really good teams. It's the Vegas Golden Knights and the Carolina Hurricanes, who are coming up again on the schedule, that are able to do that on a nightly basis. But how you look at what the Lightning did last night, if they could play like this, which I think we could all agree isn't exactly a complex game plan, this is something that could completely turn around the season. And I know that, like, that's a little bit of a dramatic statement to a certain degree. The Lightning aren't necessarily in the cellar, but they're also not performing to where we could all agree where we want them to be. But this style of play, and then you factor in Vasilevsky coming back in a couple weeks or so, and if he plays the way we all expect him to play, this could mean the difference between the Lightning fighting for a wild card spot and potentially finishing in the top two in this division. I don't think that they're going to catch up to the Bruins, but I think that the way they play the last three games, especially over these last two, that's a performance that could definitely put you over a Florida. That could most definitely put you over Detroit. And definitely, once you get into the playoffs, could definitely get you deep into the playoffs. I'm talking Eastern Conference Final. But it all starts with, as we always say, the top guys last night. The Lightning, I thought, showed a ton of resilience in the time that Kucherov was out. I mean, he ended up returning for that third period, but it was a little bit of a scary moment. I think he took a hit along the boards, or he went for a puck and bumped into someone along the boards, and his leg got tangled up. And, anytime a guy like that hurts their leg, it can mean game over for them. And this team didn't bat an eye. I thought it was incredible the way they just kept chugging along. I thought it was incredible how Jonas Johansson, we'll get into him in the second segment as well, with the turnaround with this team, because really the way that this team has played over the last two games especially has really impressed me. And it all starts from the goaltender. But for everybody to get involved in this game, you got Nick Paul scoring a goal, Tanner Jeannot starting things off, Watson, who, unless you've been following this team on a nightly basis, if you're a far away Lightning fan, if you don't know who Austin Watson is. Steven Stamkos getting involved later on, which big time goal for him, which I was actually going to tweet at the time that, that whole side of the ice, the Lightning were doing a good job of kind of trying to take looks from every part of the ice, and having Hedman trying to shoot those pucks through traffic past Swayman to kind of just say, hey, like, try and stop a double deflection, because we saw a goal earlier on in the game that was, that he had trouble with on the Nick Paul goal. I kind of figured that, eventually they're going to go to Stamkos there, because, the Bruins weren't even concerned with that side of the ice, and the Lightning executed that perfectly. I think at the end of the day, when you looked at that sequence and you look what led up to the Stamkos goal, I think that was the plan all along. Have them focus on traffic in front, and then have 91 squeak out to the wing, and then boom, you got almost an easy one-timer there. And like I tweeted during the game, and I'll continue to say it until we see something even better. Up until probably those 2 goals, the game tire from Boston, and then ultimately the goal that they took the lead on. And even then, and afterwards, of course, this was the best all-around game that I've seen from this Lightning team all season long. And quite frankly, and you might disagree with me, let me know in the comments below on our YouTube page, I firmly believe win or lose, that was a great game, and I would take a 5-4 overtime win in which the Lightning play like this over a shutout win in regulation, in which they're kind of just not really playing this well. They're kind of just playing a different way, a stereotypical Lightning way in which they're kind of stumbling their way to the win, and the other team is not really doing much of anything on that night. So listen, I'll take this over any other win, any kind of win. So let me know in the comments below what you think on our YouTube page. Please go ahead, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the podcast, give us a follow there. Or if you follow us, if you rather listen to the podcast, go ahead and follow us on any audio-based app out there, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, wherever, we are there. And coming up in the second segment, we'll be talking about, the playoff vibes against the Bruins. These games I absolutely love. The Lightning won't be playing them again until the new year. And what does this kind of game mean for the Tampa Bay Lightning, as they were kind of in a little bit of a rut to start the season because, they weren't being – I feel like they weren't really playing games like this. And I've always said playing against the Bruins or a team like maybe the Maple Leafs, we'll talk about that, what that does for this team, especially when they play well. We talk about all that coming up. But first, I want to talk about our first sponsor of the day, and that is our friends over at Gametime. Now, listen, Gametime is the best app out there when it comes to buying tickets. If you haven't heard, I went to the Net game last week, and I got tickets last minute for literally next to nothing, and I got my tickets right away. And the best thing when you're looking at all these apps is that it is super easy to use. Now, you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with last killer minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You could see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute deals, lowest price guaranteed. So as always, I want to thank all of you for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We are also available on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Love hearing from all of you, so you could get in on the action in terms of the conversation. I love hearing from all of you. If you got a question for me, go ahead, comment below this video, and if I see it in time for the next episode, I will answer it, of course. We had a listener answer a question, I believe it was last week, our buddy Austin. And was it Austin? No, Joshua, I think his name. Sorry, Joshua, if I messed up your name. Answered a great question, and we ended up devoting a whole segment to it. So that could be you. So we're talking today about kind of reliving last night's phenomenal win. And that's the only way you could really describe last night. This Lightning team showed me something that I haven't seen since really the Toronto series. And that was late in the Toronto series, where the Lightning were, as we all know, playing from behind. And then 3 games into the series, they kind of just start to wake up. And then we start to see a little bit of a mini comeback. People in Toronto start to freak out. Oh my God, here we go. They're about to blow another series. Unfortunately, the Lightning didn't have a lot in the tank to come back in that series, which is fine. But when you look at this performance, especially this performance last night against Boston and the performance the other night against Edmonton. And I know for some people, they may not look at Edmonton as any type of threat in terms of when you look at what their record has been thus far. I mean, when you have Draisaitl, when you have Evander Kane, when you have Connor McDavid, especially Connor McDavid, who could beat you one-handed, single-handedly, really, and you keep him scoreless, and you're getting into a scoring fest against a team that really that's all they can do is score. They can't play defense. They can't goaltend. That's pretty much it. And then you go into that game, and I was expecting kind of a fight to start off, bringing some of that momentum from the Edmonton game, and then the better team would prevail, meaning Boston, because Boston from top to bottom is a very good team, and they love to play physical. If things aren't going their way, they try to just throw their weight around. They are a big team. I mean, the Lightning are too, but all around, there's probably not one player on this Boston team that wouldn't be afraid to go out there and hit you. And not only hit you, but try and throw you through the glass. And that's the thing that always scares me with these games when Lightning and the Bruins get together. And the Lightning always kind of, at least in years past in games in which they lose, they kind of always get into these, it's almost like a contest to them. You know, they almost forget that they need to score goals, and they completely just focus on who's going to hit harder, who's going to make the next biggest hit. And then they wear themselves down, and then they completely forget about, the actual game itself. And then Boston being always the smarter team and really just, playing their brand of hockey in which they're able to just really, for the most part, do everything better than everybody else at most of the time, takes advantage of that. And I was kind of just waiting for that last night, but the Lightning were doing a good job in terms of the physicality of the game. We saw our big hits here and there. And like I said, when things don't go well for the Bruins, they kind of turn it into a physical game. They try to draw stupid penalties after the whistle. And the Lightning didn't get sucked into any of that. They actually flipped the script on them, and Boston was called for a couple of penalties here and there. And even though the Lightning may not have capitalized on some of those opportunities, what I thought was really almost the bigger statement, other than possibly scoring a power play goal to capitalize on that, was kind of just wearing that team down and kind of defeating them in the mental game. And when the Lightning play like that, and they play discipline for the most part, I thought that the Lightning played a very good disciplined game. That's really, really something that you could bring with you into the next matchup. And unfortunately, the Lightning and the Bruins do not play each other for a couple of months, which is kind of lame. I would love to see the two teams get back to it right away, like maybe a week later, but the NHL didn't schedule it like that. But given how this game was played by Tampa Bay, I really am more optimistic than I have been coming out of any game this year. And the fact that they played a game that we have seen from them before, in which has made them successful, a lot of Lightning fans should be really, really positive and feeling great after last night. Because if you look at the upcoming schedule, you got Colorado, you got Winnipeg tomorrow night, you got Carolina later in the week. That's the kind of games that the Lightning could easily win, especially that Carolina Colorado games. And those are teams that are very, very good. Those are both playoff teams. And when you get Andre Vasilevsky back, if he plays the way we all know or hope that he could play, and you bring that into how this team played over the last couple of games, like I said before, this is a team that could easily go from a wild card playoff team to a team that could potentially finish in the top two. who could be maybe snipping at the heels of the Bruins at some point later in the season. I don't think that in realistic terms that the Lightning are going to get close to Boston in the standings, just because Boston has just patted themselves such a lead to start off the season. But the fact that Tampa was able to go toe to toe with them and win in overtime, something that they haven't done all season long. I think the stat was that the Lightning haven't won a game in overtime since like last December, which is just insane. And maybe that's just a regular season thing, because I kind of do remember them winning the playoffs. But I mean, last night, that was as close to the level of a team like Boston as you could get. And to go toe to toe with them, to kind of defeat them at their own game of playing physical and sucking them into stupid penalties. And to kind of, you saw at certain points in the game how frustrated this Boston team was, and where they had to resort to just trying to start fights and all of that. I mean, that's winning the mental game. Winning the mental game against a top team, Boston's going to be thinking about that in their next matchup, and other teams are going to look at that too. You know, it's not going to be a big difference once the puck drops, but team like Winnipeg, team like Carolina, team like, you know, Colorado, and every team after that are kind of going to be having that in the back of their mind, like, wow, they actually not only went toe to toe with Boston, but they outplayed them physically and mentally in this game. Came back after sort of blowing the lead. I don't know if we want to call it that, because it was very much a tight game, and, you know, one crazy bounce here could have determined the game. But having the ability to score that game time goal with 4 seconds left, and then winning the game in overtime, kind of just from the initial puck drop, you could see that the Lightning were the better team, and the ice was 100% tipped in their favor. That's really something you got to look at when you're an opposing team now in the next week or so, and you got to face Tampa Bay. So let me know what you think. I mean, this really shows me that Tampa Bay is a playoff team. And I've always said that when we get to Thanksgiving, or even if you want to extend it to Christmas, as we should, because granted, Andre Vasilevsky hasn't played a game yet. Jonas Johansson, though, I thought over the last week or so in his last 6 games has really, really solidified himself as a very good goaltender. And, you know, there has been saves that he should have made. There was one save last night on a goal. I forgot which one it was. Yeah, it was a puck through traffic. I believe Watts or Radish. It was a defense. Maybe it was Radish. Blocked him a little bit on the shot, but I still think that, you know, that was a save that he should have made. He was just a little out of position there. But I think he has played phenomenal. I think he's kept this team in more games than they have really deserved to be. And I don't think that once Vasilevsky comes back that they should just kind of stick him on the bench and let Vazzy kind of ride this out. I think really more so, if John Cooper plays this the right way, we'll see more time out of Jonas Johansson as a backup. I think it'll almost be split 50-50, because I think that if this team's playing well, if they get a playoff spot, I think that the way Cooper should handle this is kind of, let's play Vazzy enough to where he is still, you know, that he gets in a groove and he's playing well, but let's not wear him out, because then we could ride him every night in the playoffs. And that's the way it should be. And I think now that you know what you're going to get out of Johansson and the way he's played, I think he's deserved enough, and he showed enough to where he could be that, almost that goaltender B, if you want to call it, where the Lightning could almost kind of revert to a 2-goalie system. I don't think it'll be as clear as day as a 2-goalie system, but it'll be the closest thing you'll ever see in the Andre Vasilevsky era. So let me know in the comments below what you think about that. And we'll wrap things up with, is what we've seen over the last couple of wins, have the Lightning turned a corner? Is this the team we're going to get for the rest of the year? We'll talk about that in just a bit. But first, we're going to wrap things up with our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, listen, passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, all the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So wrapping things up on the show, as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. And as always, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. I love hearing from all of you. Like I said, if you want to get in touch with me there, you can. You could tweet to me. You could DM me. If you want to just post a general question, even if you don't watch the show on that platform, you could post a question under our latest video on YouTube. So go ahead and do that. And while you're there, please go ahead and subscribe and hit that thumbs up. So it helps the algorithm and maybe lets people who don't know that this show exists know, and informs them, and then they could help the show grow. So what we've seen from this team over the last couple of games, Lightning are currently on a 3-game win streak. And yeah, that's great. You always love to string a couple of wins together, especially after how Tampa has kind of underperformed this season. Now we got to ask ourselves, with how the team has played against, maybe let's not make a big deal out of it, the win against Edmonton. But at the same time, I think that keeping McDavid scoreless is definitely something that you should kind of pat yourself on the back. And then going toe-to-toe with Boston in overtime is really a big deal. Now, looking forward with who this team is playing over the next couple of weeks. Tomorrow night, we got Winnipeg, and then we're on the road in Carolina, and then Colorado, Arizona, and Pittsburgh. And, depending on how you feel about Winnipeg, I think Winnipeg's a team that just has a ton of potential. They got off to a little bit of a rough start this year, but now they're third in the Central Division out in the West, and only behind two very good teams in Colorado and Dallas. So definitely not a team to take lightly. And then, like I said, right after that, they got Colorado. So two out of the top 3 teams in the Central Division coming to you this week and next week. With the way that the Lightning have played, especially what they showed us against Boston, I think it's very, very possible that the Lightning can win those games. I haven't seen a whole ton of those teams, obviously, because they're out in the West, and those games are a little bit later than I would like to stay up for. I think that if the Lightning are going to win one of those games, I think the more likely scenario would be Colorado. I just feel like, especially if Hellebuck plays tomorrow night, I think the Lightning will have, and if he plays well, I think the Lightning could have a little bit of issues with him, given if they get into some sort of scoring fest. And, like I said, as well as Johansson has played, and like I said, he has definitely earned himself a spot as the backup goaltender to Vazzy when he comes back. And I would imagine we'll get still a little bit more playing time than you would get out of your backup goaltender. I think the only scenario in which the Lightning can outplay the Jets is if they just come out and just hit them right away in the first couple of periods and kind of just pad their lead. But if you get into a scoring fest against the Jets, which we'll talk about more on tomorrow's episode for the preview, I think that it's going to be a little bit more difficult than just outscoring the Bruins with Jeremy Swayman, who I'm not convinced is a number one goaltender still. That might be a little bit controversial. Colorado, I think that if you just keep the Stars under control, I think that there's a very winnable game. Arizona, I would fully expect that the Lightning win that game, regardless of the young amount of talent that the Coyotes have. The game that is going to be very interesting for me, in the game in which will feel like a playoff game, is the game against Pittsburgh. Even though the Penguins have kind of struggled to start off the season, I thought their veteran group obviously has kept them together and has kept them in it. You know, I think they were in last place in the Atlantic at one point. Now it looks like they're moving their way up, and the only teams that they're behind right now are Carolina and Washington. So we'll see if, I would imagine, I wouldn't count them out. They're just that team that, until they're 100% eliminated from the playoffs, I would say, I wouldn't count them out. I wouldn't doubt them to get their act together and play like a team that is going to be a playoff team. So the Lightning need to bring their A game that night and finish out the month of November on a high note. So let me know in the comments below what you think. Is this what we've seen over the last couple of games? Is this the team that we're going to get for the rest of the year? I think it's very possible. I think this team, if they just continue to play like that, if they play this way, teams will have to adjust to them and not the other way around. The Lightning could just go out there and worry about themselves. They don't have to worry about the opposing team, the opposing players, because that style of play kind of makes the world revolve around you. So let me know in the comments below what you think. And we'll be back tomorrow to preview the game against the Winnipeg Jets and all that other fun stuff. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. I'll talk to you in the next one.